Good evening. I have a little activity I'd like us to do. As the professor in the room, I have to get my students engaged in what we're up to. And so I'm going to ask you to, if you don't have a pen, you can take a pen. And then I'm going to ask you to take a piece of paper and a Post-it and a pen. So take that and pass that around and pass it behind. And what I'm going to be asking you to do is, I'm curious if you were presented with a survey that asked you to approximate the percentage of the population in Colorado Springs that is foreign born, what percentage would that be? So just write down a number. There's going to be no judgment, no comparisons of answers or anything like that. So when you're done, you can crinkle it up. I usually like to play basketball and have you throw it in, but for time's sake, I'm going to just go right into the conversation that we have today. Okay. So I just want to say how pleased I am to be here this evening with you. I am very delighted that Stephanie asked me to be a part of this series and that we've had a really fruitful, engaging conversation thus far about a variety of topics. I'm going to start by telling you a story because I think that anything that was ever worth knowing begins with once upon a time. And in the wake of serious discussions about immigration and refugee resettlement in the United States, these brief comments are designed to discuss the future of UrbanCOS, entangled with conversations about immigrant and refugee futures here in Colorado Springs as well. So I don't know really where to start my story. I could start in 1973, the year I was born, in a dense urban Washington, D.C., where it was pretty much a black-white dichotomy of race relations, and where my family proceeded to do the white flight thing and jump ship on the urban dynamics of Washington, D.C., and gravitate towards the suburbs of Fairfax Station, Virginia. Or I could jump to 1985, which was like the height of Miami Vice. And my dad tells us in the middle of the dinner one evening, we're moving to Miami, Florida. And suddenly I'm in the midst of immigrant USA, Cuba, Little Havana, USA, and treated to a whole different diverse group of migrants from a variety of places in Latin America. I could jump to 1994 in London, where I did a study abroad and where there were tons and tons of immigrant histories and layers of geomorphology that dictated how influential immigrants were in that particular city. I could go to Phoenix, where I spent my graduate degrees, or I could go to Austin, where I was a professor for 5 years before I came to Colorado Springs at UT Austin, and where when I heard about the job in Colorado Springs 12 years ago, I said, oh my gosh, every single year, U.S. News and World Report says Austin and Colorado Springs are competing for the #1 best place to live. So when I got here, my instinct was, this is going to be a very similar place to Austin. It's totally ready, prepared, convinced for that, right? And as I hear the crowd saying, maybe it wasn't quite the same, but still, there's some interesting connections. And as a geographer interested in immigration, you might ask, what do geographers ask and do in this particular field? Well, we ask things like, where are immigrants and refugees living? Are those places of exclusion or inclusion? And how are those boundaries maintained and are transformed over time? And lastly, what are some of the social, economic, and political implications? Okay, so everybody has done their survey. I won't look at them now. But here are some Colorado Springs immigration facts. And you can sort of give me a verbal language as to how you did on this. So from 2010 to 2017, about 7.5% of the population in Colorado Springs was foreign born. This compares to Colorado's average, which is 9.8%, and the US average, which is 13.2%. And this is based on the 2017 US Census 5-year estimates of population numbers. You can see there's some cities in Colorado Springs that are far more similar to the US or even overrepresented in migrant populations. And us, who is much further down the list, about 7.8, 7.5%. From 2010 to 2017, we received about 750 new foreign-born migrants in Colorado Springs per year. And the largest source region was Latin America with 40%, followed by Asia, 28%, and Europe, 21%. Notice here that that's quite different, particularly from the Americas, where usually we see about 55% nationally coming from the Americas, and we're much lower representation in that area. And at the same time, we have a much higher representation of European migrants. And of course, there's many reasons for that. One main reason is because of the military culture here in Colorado Springs and the connections we have to Europe and the Air Force bases and things over there. So how well did everybody do? Probably, I'm guessing, pretty good. 8%. Oh, that's good. And going back to my story, if anything that's worth knowing, this worth once upon a time, this is by far the city where I have lived with the very smallest percentage of foreign-born population. So in all of those other cities, they're much closer to the national average. And of course, in a place like Miami, it's 50+% foreign-born. At the same time, some stats about refugees, because this is where I focus a lot of my work. From 2010 to 2017, about 0.5% of refugees in the United States were settled in Colorado Springs upon arrival. That means that we resettled about 180 refugees per year. The largest source of those migrants were from Afghanistan, Iraq, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Somalia. We've seen a big change in those numbers, and in the first quarter of fiscal year 2019, Colorado Springs just received 11 arrivals in that first quarter, and that's about 14% of expected arrivals. By the third quarter, we just got that data. We're up to about 55 arrivals, but that's still only about 30% of what we expected. Colorado Springs, one of the reasons geographers are so interested, we love looking at the landscape around us and how the landscapes transform to accommodate newcomers. We see impacts on the landscapes. And as Dr. Harner, who's in the room, knows, from 1900 to 1930, we saw significant impacts of the foreign-born immigrant laborers in Colorado Springs. And then we saw a big dip in that, and currently we're seeing some markers as we experience new urban growth of the foreign-born population. And these recent migrants come to Colorado Springs, and they really want to recreate a sense of cohesiveness and community. And there's some great work by some of our graduate students and by some nonprofits in the community that are illustrating how these newcomers are not only creating this sense of cohesiveness, but economic viability and achievements in creating their own small businesses and activities. And we should also not underestimate the role of the second generation in Colorado Springs. The second generation is about 35% of those individuals who we count as ethnic racial minorities in Colorado Springs. And we know that a lot of the integration that happens in a community, which we're talking about here in UrbanCOS, is about that second generation and making sure that they become embroiled in the fabric of our community. And we see crazy things like watermelon eating contests that show the confusion that often happens in that second generation of struggling to fit in with the new culture at the same time as navigating what is traditional culture here. And these are Indians here in Colorado Springs. So we ask questions like, what is the extent and meaningfulness of interaction among the various residents in Colorado Springs? And does the arrival of immigrants and refugees in our city prompt collectivity, cooperation, or conflict amongst various residents how did these migrants, refugees in the second generation fit into the idea of what we talked about last time, the creative entrepreneurs, and are embraced into that concept and infused into our diverse urban culture? So here's a map of refugee resettlement in Colorado Springs. And for reasons of confidentiality and wanting to make sure that we don't pinpoint exactly where a particular population lives, we have these black boxes that show us the general areas of settlement where refugees are resettled as a result of sponsors coming in and working with local landlords and navigating and getting cheap rents for our refugees. And you can see they're dispersed quite far in the city. And of course, these are individuals that don't come in with any transportation, with any resources. They basically have a suitcase. And so when they arrive, one of the first things they have to do is figure out how to navigate public transportation. Very quickly, most of them, particularly the Afghanis and the Iraqis, learn that a driver's license is key. And they have a very strong community of cohesion that helps them navigate the driver's license process. But for the Democratic Republic of Congo migrants and for some of the other Central African nations, it's much harder for them to navigate, and they don't have those same networks. And so a lot depends on the community itself of information sharing and providing that kind of thing. But we theorize about landscapes of exclusion, and this is a quote from David Sibley, a famous geographer on this topic, who says that the human landscape can be read as a landscape of exclusion, whereby less powerful groups in society are forced to live in less desirable environments. And so we're seeing a little bit of that. We're also seeing it with our Latino population here in Colorado Springs. So here's a very basic map of where Latinos are living by absolute numbers of where people are. And you can see, of course, the southeastern corridor of our city, much like where the refugees are settling, is also the place of settlement for those individuals coming in who claim Hispanic or Latino on the census form. At the same time, if you look at quintile data on household income, you can see that for the foreign-born population, the vast majority live in the first or second quartile of income. So with numbers less than $40,000, the vast majority of our immigrant households are navigating that. And even more importantly, 16% of foreign-born households in Colorado Springs, compared to 8% of native-born households, are living in family poverty. So it's a cautionary tale when we think about what's going on in Colorado Springs, and I compare it to some of the experiences I've had living and studying immigrants and refugees in other communities in the United States, where we have to think about, are we restricting access to and through space? And if so, this is one of the most consistent ways to limit the economic and political rights of groups. Are we, through spatial jurisdiction in schools, housing, public facilities, transportation, et cetera, somehow separating these lesser groups, if you will, from the first-class citizens that are here in the Springs? And as a result, are we then creating these social categories that are reinforced and maintained in place over time, that it becomes harder and harder for the second generation kids and the third generation to gain access and see mobility in their experiences? And so we need to be ensuring that we're creating a supportive ecosystem for newcomer populations as well. And that's why I bring up the PlanCOS, because I know that Paige is going to tell us some of the ways in which we're making steps forward in that area. Maybe. I thought it was a nice transition for her. Here at UCCS, we are doing quite a bit to inform the public and our neighbors about what's going on in terms of immigration. Through the Global Intercultural Research Center, we've done a whole series of film showings and this cool Unity project where we made a public art display using yarn and dancing around and creating this big woven thing on our campus that was very successful. We had 1,200 people participate in that particular experience, which we borrowed, I think, from Celebration a long time ago. And so the ways in which we can create steps forward and also think about, in terms of immigrant and refugee futures, do we want to take a look at some of the other cities where I've been that have designated themselves as a welcoming city or a welcoming county, and think about the ways that we can send a message, because our economic future is somewhat dependent on bringing more and more of these newcomers into our population. So with that, I'll hand it over to Paige.
So nice to be here again and to participate in all three of these events, and that feels good, so I can kind of come full circle. And wow, to follow up from Emily and to respond to the immigrant question is difficult. So I will start with PlanCOS, and then we can get into that topic. So PlanCOS is unabashedly a marketing campaign. And so we have really designed our PlanCOS to be a marketing tool to reach out to other communities, to show the level of development and standards that we're reaching for. So here we have PlanCOS. If just to kind of break down its numbers, we have a wonderful vision, and I implore you to look at PlanCOS online and dig a little deeper into it. We have 6 themes, 32 typologies, 10 indicators. We also have 9 maps that are included in this plan, 27 big ideas, 28 goals, 82 policies, and that 340 strategies, that's actually quite low compared to the plan that we had previously. That plan that we had previous to this plan was completed in 2001. And so it's been a while since we've updated our comprehensive plan for the city. And as Josh indicated, it is the physical development plan, it's the land use plan, it's the overarching umbrella plan for all other plans. So we do expect it to be paid attention to when development comes in, when other plans are being created. We hope it is paid attention to. So we had a very robust process. It was a 2.5-year process that we had many partnerships with. We had 50 community partners, 18 steering committee members, 52 staff and technical support team members, and we had a wonderful 90 co-creators. Those were community members that came to meetings, that helped us in the community to reach out to the community to gain further information to support how the plan was created. We had a very strong social media presence, 24,000 social media interactions, 274 meetings. We were out there. I mean, I made a joke at one point and early on, like, what are you trying to do, win an award for all your meetings you're going to? So, funny thing is, we did win an award recently with the Colorado American Planning Association for our comprehensive plan. So we're proud of that. And we'll see what other awards come down the line. And then we had, we're really proud of our survey responses. We had 2 surveys, but we were able to reach 5,000 people with those surveys. Our surveys were in Spanish and English. We did not have, to kind of speak to the immigration question, we did not have as many responses in Spanish as we would have liked or thought we would have even gotten. So efforts to reach those communities that were either underserved or you know, in different pockets of our fabric of our city. We did what we could to go to those communities to gather more information to see what the community was expecting from our plan and how we could further involve those individuals. So we did go to the southeast part of town. We piggybacked on events that were throughout the city. We tried to cover all parts of the city in our planning and information gathering. We did have a very strong response from the urban core and those zip codes with those survey responses. So tying that back into the downtown and urban parts of our city. So, you know, let me go back to these notes. So here's some more of our marketing. You know, we have the 6 vision themes, and all of these themes, majestic landscapes, renowned culture, vibrant neighborhoods, strong connections, thriving economy, and unique places, those all, you know, they're all woven into that urban aspect, but we are predominantly a suburban city. So some of that is a changing landscape, some of it is a redeveloping landscape, but predominantly it's suburban. And in those suburban places, there's aspects of placemaking. Some of that placemaking is more robust in areas, and some of it is less so. You might find areas on a map where there's not as many community centers, there's not as many shopping centers. So we're trying to identify those areas to see what, you know, where are we missing some of that culture. All right, so we did a lot of analysis on our city. This is an inset of a larger map of our city. It is our capacity and our changing parcel map. So this methodology behind it is parcel based, and it looks at vacant land layers. The red you'll see is mostly vacant land. The pinkish colors are areas that we have identified either that the land value is equaling or is you know, a little bit different than the improvement value. So if you have a hotel, the improvement value is high. The land value might also be gaining in ground, but some of those parcels that are in pink, maybe the improvement value, the actual built, if there's a building on that land, that built environment, the value is a little bit lower. So it's more likely to redevelop. The downtown area, you'll see, this is really focusing on more of the southern part of it and the central part. There is a northern part to the downtown area that is not on this map. Okay, so I'm going to leave it here for a second while I go back to my notes, and we're going to talk about what PlanCOS is. So it's an advisory document in its nature, but it is written and intended to support neighborhood planning, sustainable development, and mixed-use development, transit, affordable housing, art and culture, smart technologies, walkable and bikeable connections and communities that support that, economic development, infill and urban renewal projects, and an appropriate increase in density, the highest densities being downtown. Where you go in the community, you'll get a different viewpoint of what and how dense people would like their community. But downtown is that density would support transit, that density would support mixed-use development. So we'll see that a little bit more in the downtown area. There are some key trends. For over the next 20 years, our household types will continue to diversify. Demand for more urban and walkable areas and neighborhoods are what our incoming populations are asking for. So if you do a search of PlanCOS, this is kind of fun to do, there are 300 instances where downtown is called out. And so that'll tell you how important our downtown is to our community as a whole. So our vibrant downtown is important for the predominantly embracing creative infill. We do have a few vacant land pieces in the downtown area, but mostly it's going to be a redevelopment of some space that's in need of redevelopment, or it's has some disinvestment. So we need to, PlanCOS does call out for creative connections between urban and natural environments, parks and waterways, and integrating human scale design, transit stops, and civic facilities. We also have language that says that in downtown areas we want to orient our buildings towards the public realm, and then also create those connections to parks and civic centers, and again, more walkable, bikeable, multimodal transportation that would connect those uses. So ultimately, PlanCOS refers to, in its downtown and core area, the Experience Downtown Master Plan. So that's the essential guide for downtown. And we just in PlanCOS have some really important key factors that we suggest. But the most important document there we lead to in PlanCOS is the Envision Downtown Master Plan. I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I think I'm okay. All right. So, we call out some language in our plan for park enhancements, alley and street activation projects, a variety of housing options, a challenge because, really the United States is no longer an affordable place to live. So how is Colorado Springs relating to that? It's no longer really affordable, and downtown is becoming increasingly no longer affordable. So those are some factors that we do need to address, and we do have a housing plan, an attainable housing plan. Affordable housing plan it's affordable housing plan. Attainable and affordable, that is a conversation we can have. But the affordable housing plan that's coming through the city is addressing those populations that are at need the most. So hopefully we can figure out some solutions to supporting more affordable housing. There's also the economy that we have, and we're working with experience economy. So this is a changing culture of economy. Retail is still present, but is it the experience economy, an economy where it's entertainment that is driving our economics and our markets? It's a lifestyle, and it's a choice. These are factors that we weigh in PlanCOS and in the downtown area. We also call out car share programs as well as bike share programs. Those are something you'd see probably in Denver. They will come to Colorado Springs. We will, see that more. So that's kind of exciting. It's like the future is coming, and do we really know what it's all entails? But it's coming, and how do we manage that? So this plan has some guidelines that would support future development, smart technologies, And then also remembering that we have sustainability that we need to keep in mind, and the natural environment and how we maintain that kind of balanced connection. So I'd also want to call out that here, these are some indicators, a dashboard that we have for PlanCOS. With the Downtown Partnership, track residential units that are added downtown, and the total building permit valuation of that development. If you go to PlanCOS, you could see year over year that growth. Then we also have a density. I added this density indicator to this slide because our overall new residential development for the city, we're looking at 8.4 dwelling units per acre. I did attempt to do some of the density calculations for the downtown area, but we are a huge mix of commercial and residential is still catching up, so the numbers weren't as interesting as you would hope they would be. So in cities that are really dense and can support transit-oriented development and a robust transit system and light rail system, you might see something more like 100 dwelling units per acre. As bigger cities would be even larger. That would be a good middle weight value. And we have our typologies. This typology, what I indicated earlier in the slides, calls out downtown, and then again that ultimately it's the experience downtown master plan that is guiding our specific development downtown. But we see, the connections to I-25, multimodal networks, integrated high-density housing options, mixed use, pedestrian-friendly, wide sidewalks. So all of those things that a great city has and should have, we call out that because, that's what we should have. And that is where I will end.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paige, for teeing off our Experience Downtown plan very well. I will also add UCCS alumni.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so
That's
I
great.
feel like I should say that since I'm here. Thanks for having me tonight. This has been such a great series, and I'm going to share a little bit more about our Experience Downtown plan and go rather quickly through things because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for discussion. But I just want to remind you all too, when we talk about downtown, how we define it is a little over 1 square mile in a city of nearly 200 square miles. So we essentially go north to Colorado College, south to the railroad tracks, west to I-25, and east to sort of Wasatch and a little node beyond that. And I always do want to remind folks kind of how we as an organization are structured. We're actually 4 organizations. Downtown Partnership is a business membership organization, but we serve as the management company for 2 tax districts downtown. And then we also have a charitable nonprofit arm that does all the fun stuff like public art and ice skating and First Friday gallery walks and things like that. So really that makes us a placemaking organization. We're focused on just one small area of the city, but within that we kind of do a little bit of everything. Which makes life fun and eclectic and something different every single day. But a couple other things that I think are worth noting about our downtown. I know for those of you who participated in the last session, you learned about creative placemaking and some of the great creative things we have going on, and we are a state certified creative district, which is something we're very proud of. Downtown is also an opportunity zone, which really is sort of a new federal program. I'm not going to go into those details, but I think what's interesting about that is opportunity zones were determined by selecting low-income census tracts. I think sometimes when we talk about people living downtown, we have this impression that it's people in the fancy lofts, and there's a little bit of that. But technically, based on the last census, downtown is still low-income census tract. I suspect when the new census is done, I think we might still end up being low-income census tract, but then not the next one after that. I'm sure we will start to see some changes with that. And I think another thing worth mentioning in our downtown, when we talk about land use and how much that affects the experience, we operate with a different planning code downtown, what's called a form-based code. And very briefly, most cities, they operate with sort of what's called Euclidean zoning. Goes back to the idea that you had to separate the uses, right? When you had big factories or whatever, you separated the industrial from the residential, from the agricultural and the commercial, and had all these separate uses. Form-based code just looks at the form of a structure and wants to encourage mixed-use development and really encourages more pedestrian-oriented kinds of building structure. And when you think about it, there's really only 2 areas in our entire city that I consider pedestrian-oriented, and that's downtown and Old Colorado City. Now you see people building new neighborhoods, and you know, we think about urban, and what comes to mind is that word walkability. Everyone's now trying to recreate neighborhoods because that is shown as almost the #1 thing people say when they're looking for a home or something. Walkable is really rising up on the list of the kinds of things that people want, because that's what people love about downtowns. So our experience downtown plan was created with input from really thousands of folks and integration of existing plans in the community, and it was 3 years ago this month that it was adopted by City Council. And it really is a document that we refer to constantly and are absolutely checking off the goals and the tactics in this document. And I will share a little bit about that. But a couple things, I'm not going to read to you all the goals, but I think a few are worth pointing out. In the center, our goal 1 for downtown to serve as the economic and cultural heart of the city. And really, I think that's what every city strives for, is that heart of the city. And for us, it was important to put economic and cultural together because we really believe those 2 things are important to be aligned together. All the other goals, we didn't want to sort of put priorities around what was most important, but we did want that one in the center. Many of the other goals you might see as similar to other cities: walkable, bike-friendly. But in particular, when you look at goal number 3, celebrating and connecting with outdoor recreation in our exceptional natural setting, that's a kind of goal you're not going to see in other urban plans. And I think it's something that downtown Colorado Springs can distinguish itself really nationwide. Like, we have a great art scene, but frankly, lots of downtowns and urban areas, that's where your art scene thrives. Not every urban area can say, wow, you can leave your Class A office space on your lunch hour and get on your mountain bike and have world-class mountain biking and then go back at the end of your lunch hour. So for us, we think that is a way we can sort of stand out. You can't do that in Denver. You can get the great outdoor environment in a mountain town in Colorado, but you don't have urban. Or you can have urban in Denver, but you don't have great mountain access. We think we can do both. We just need to be a little more urban, which is something we're working on every day. So we measure what we're doing very closely in our State of Downtown report that comes out each spring. In that report earlier this year, we've tracked about $860 million in recent investment into downtown. I can guarantee you when we release the report next year, those updated figures will start with a B in the billion now, because we are seeing a big resurgence, as you all noticed, in people rediscovering downtown and investing in downtown. I will say one of the trends that we find really encouraging too, when we look at where this investment is occurring, it's not just in one part of downtown. Like a lot of cities, when they start taking off, it's like all the investments in the waterfront or in one area. But here we're seeing like Catalyst Campus doing great stuff, and then the Olympic Museum's coming over here, and then Colorado College is doing this. So I think it's really healthy that we're seeing these investments occurring kind of throughout our downtown. So a couple trends and some of the things that are important to us. We as a city have been really behind in having people living in our downtown. That's one thing that's really been holding us back, and it's so important for so many reasons. The health of your retail and restaurant, absolutely, it survives on people living in the downtown. Safety, more people out walking around, walking the dog at night, all those things, more eyes on the street. And we're slowly and now more rapidly turning the corner on having more people living in our downtown. We set a goal to have 1,000 new units completed or under construction by 2020, and we're actually going to reach that goal, which is a tremendous change from almost no new units coming online in the past many years. As you know, there's several new hotels coming downtown, and again, some people say, "Ooh, can we sustain all this?" Our downtown, until that Hilton Garden Inn opened a couple weeks ago, just has 2 hotels. How many thriving cities do you know that have only 2 hotels in their downtown? And we've just had the Antlers, and the Money Exchange has only been around not that many years. So our downtown has been underserved because we know more and more when people travel, even if they arrive here by car, and we kind of are a drive market for tourism, people want to park their car and they don't want to keep figuring out where to park and what to do. They want to park it, and then they want to walk to those restaurants and do all of the things they're going to do, or they're going to Uber or Lyft somewhere and not figure out, oh, how do I have to get around a city I'm not familiar with, which is why people choose to be in downtowns when they travel. We're also seeing some interesting kind of changes in our office market, if you will. A lot of people are saying like, wow, I wish we could lure some great big employer downtown, which I wish we could too. But if we had an employer of say 300, 500 people say, I want to be downtown, we would have nowhere to put them. Our office vacancy rates have really shrunk, which is overall a very good thing. But with costs of new construction and our current lease rates, it wouldn't be feasible for someone to build new office right now. It'd be pretty risky. Now that's going to slowly start to change. But what we're seeing now are sort of some smaller properties converting, fixing themselves up, and also kind of, reinventing their look and feel that's more contemporary, that's more attractive to what the kinds of offices people want today. So before we get like a bigger office tower, what you're going to see is a lot of sort of smaller properties kind of reinventing themselves and attracting sort of smaller companies, which I think is also really healthy. I'm not looking to be like the, a town dominated by one major employer versus having lots of cool smaller businesses growing and thriving in downtown. So talking a bit too about our retail and restaurant scene, we have the largest concentration of locally owned restaurants in Southern Colorado, which I think is something to be proud of and something that helps us stand out. And I would actually say I'm really quite proud of what we have in retail. We all know retail struggles these days. It's going through a huge change with the internet, as well as with how people live. Other generations now, they don't want to acquire a bunch of stuff. They want to have experiences, which means going to have a craft beer or doing whatever, not necessarily buying lots of things. The fact that we have the retail that we do downtown is pretty remarkable. And I think some of that is owed to the fact that a lot of our retail anchors own their own property. So when you think about it, for those of you familiar with downtown stores, Poor Richard's, Rutledge's, Sparrowhawk, Terra Verde, they all own their building. So when times are tough, when the recession hit, and maybe it'd be like really easy to just sort of say, I'm getting out, they had equity in their building. So it's something I'm very mindful of how do we support some of these new businesses going in. If they want to own their property, can we help them own their property? How can we make sure that some of these locally owned businesses are able to thrive? And we're also seeing these businesses kind of change what they're doing as well. Now you see much more sort of the artisan market that has within it maybe 50 other businesses inside of all these makers in them. And that's not just a trend in Colorado Springs. That's certainly a trend that we're seeing in lots of cities. You may have also noticed we've had a lot of churn this year. Some places closing, other places opening up, and people sort of raise their eyebrow at that and wonder, well, are you concerned? And to me, I think it's to be expected when a market is good, and we know it's good times right now, right? And so some of these business owners and property owners, maybe their exit strategy was, I think I'm going to retire or sell in 3 years or whatever. And then when they see if things are good now, maybe they need to go ahead and take advantage of this time. But what we are seeing is when that's happening, the time on market for a vacancy, way shorter than it used to be. So, I was sad to see Il Vicino leave, but instantly Jack's Fish House was like, this is where we want to be. We've been wanting to be in downtown Colorado Springs for a long time. Whereas maybe in the past, that might have sat empty for a couple years. We don't see that kind of thing happening as much anymore, which is really quite encouraging overall. So a couple things also called out in our Experience Downtown plan in terms of what's ahead for downtown. We're working on a gateways project. We have worked with planners to look at the sort of 9 vehicular entrances into downtown. And how do we make a statement that you are entering the heart of the city, the historic heart of the city, and improving those areas and that arrival experience through signage, lighting, public art. You're going to see these popping up in the next couple of months, and it's going to be pretty cool, I think. We're also looking at our alleyways, and I know that was mentioned earlier. How do we make them interesting, safe, fun, more meaningful ways to get around through a city. A lot of cities are looking at how they can improve their alleyways. So by adding lighting, cleaning things up a bit, one of the reasons among the many that we're looking at this is we want to make sure as Southwest Downtown, where the Olympic Museum is going, and it's going to be all new and bright and shiny, we need to make sure those areas connect to each other and that people know if they're going to the museum, they can then come here to the heart and find these locally owned shops and restaurants and not forget or if you will, let this older part of downtown just kind of ease away instead of showing it off more and highlighting it more. Talking about connectivity, other things, expanding our bike ride bike share launched last year, and now we've just recently expanded service to the west side and hopefully further soon, and we are now all e-bikes, which again, staying on top of the trend. E-bikes are the way to go, and we're seeing, again, a little bit more inclusive. E-bikes are very attractive to people of all ages. In fact, just Saturday night, I was at an event having dinner, and an older lady was just saying, well, yeah, my generation likes those. So we're already seeing that some folks feel like it allows them to participate in a ride with friends or family that maybe they would have not taken that ride because they felt like they couldn't keep up or something. A couple other things too that we're working on through our Downtown Development Authority. We recently purchased a property downtown that we are intending to turn into affordable artist housing. Working with a developer out of Minneapolis called ArtSpace. They've developed over 50 projects across the country. And what also makes them special is they are uniquely mission-based so that the housing stays affordable in perpetuity, which frankly a lot of affordable housing isn't set up that way. It's maybe 20 years or something like that, and then it can convert. So we got a long ways to go on that. First step is first step was market studies and other things, but acquiring the property has to happen before you can start going after the financing. So don't expect to see a crane on this site anytime soon, but we are working hard to make it happen. And of course, what's guiding a lot of this new investment and motivating folks is the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Museum, which will be opening in April of next year. Building is really pretty much very close to completion. Then all the exhibits and such will go in. But what I think one of the most amazing things about this project that is not mentioned enough is how this building is designed, because it celebrates the achievements of Olympic and Paralympic American athletes. Incredible attention has gone into an equity of experience no matter what somebody's ability or disability is. So not just building a building that is ADA accessible because you have to by law and you check the box. It is very much designed so that anybody, no matter their ability or disability, has the same experience as everyone else. So it's not like, oh, you in the wheelchair, take the elevator and we'll meet you on the other side. Every attention has been brought into how people will experience this. They're even talking about doing low sensory hours and low sensory days for people who have sensory issues. I think it's really going to be internationally known as much for that. Like here we may know it more because it's celebrating American athletes. Internationally, people are probably going to care more about how design and the exhibit design was used to be more inclusive to people of all backgrounds. Downtown Stadium, also getting people very excited. That's going into a property, if you're familiar with where the Warehouse restaurant is and the empty lot next door. So that's moving forward, and then also Robeson Arena, so that for the first time ever, Colorado College will be able to have Tiger hockey on their campus. So that's also getting folks excited about things. So, gee, I did go fast. There you go. There's a couple things. So we have more time to talk.
Thank you so much.